Happy Friday, Chicago! Welcome back to the C2E2 live stage. I am Mike Avila from SYFY Wire, and I host Behind the Panel, a series of interviews with comic creators to find out the who, what, when, where, why of the process. We also do a video series called Artist Alley, where the artists show us how they do what they do with pen and ink on paper or oversized board, as we're doing here today. And our guest today is Cully Hamner, the artist behind Batman and The Signal.
Cully, hey, how you doing?
Being here.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so I think I gave it away who you're going to draw, but
what? What are you talking about? Am I drawing? I'm drawing. Okay.
You're gonna draw Batman
and The Signal.
And The Signal for us today, which is kind of nice. We're getting two for the price of one.
Yeah, I'm going to try to get this done as quickly as I can. And if I turn my back to the audience at some point, please don't be offended. I got to turn at some point to draw this thing. So I'm going to start off just some really loose kind of drawings to kind of get this the kind of basic figure in.
Do you always start each drawing the same way with the same little movements and routines?
Yeah, I mean, like I try to keep it loose. You don't want to one thing you don't want to do when you're drawing something like this is to immediately go into trying to finish it, because drawing is a series of mistakes that you correct, right? So you want to just go ahead and make all your mistakes. Don't be afraid of mistakes. Mistakes are your friend. You just got to fix them, that's all.
Mistakes are your friend, okay.
Yeah. Don't be afraid to be terrible, because you can always make it less terrible as you go. So, got a little bit of a figure kind of roughed in there, and then we're going to do a little bit of, Batman's a bigger dude. A little bit taller than Duke. I'm going to rough him in there right there. Got the broad shoulders. Not really used to drawing standing up. This is a little bit different for me.
A special occasion. We wanted to get you out of your comfort zone, Cully.
Yeah, which is always good. Scare the crap out of me. That's what you want.
Now, at this stage in your career, is it easy for you to get the perspective right when you're doing multiple characters in a drawing?
Define easy. I mean,
easier.
I know how to do it, but I don't. It gets easier over the years, but I don't think you ever want to consider it easy. I mean, you always want to put a lot of thought into what you're doing. You always want to, just really kind of keep your head in the game. So it's. I won't say it's a struggle, but it's a process that you have to go through. It's very much a thought process. So, okay, and. Start detailing this a little bit. Duke is one of those, or The Signal is one of those characters that I've had to kind of define how to draw him as I've worked on this book, because the character was originally designed by Greg Capullo, amazing artist. But when we did this book, they wanted me to kind of stylize the costume and kind of redefine it a little bit. So there was a lot of that and a lot of world building going on in this book, so I had to sort of figure it out as I go. And of course, as soon as I get it all figured out, the book's over with. That's just how that always goes. So with Duke, I always try to make his eyes bigger than Batman's, kind of in the vein of something like Spider-Man or something like that. But I still want to keep that kind of bat mask kind of shape,
So you're well known for your designs on characters. You redesigned Blue Beetle. You worked with Jim Lee on the redesigns for the New 52.
Right.
What's your process like when you get the assignment to redesign Duke for Batman and The Signal? How does it go? How do you figure out what you want to do with the costume that's different from the original version?
I mean, it really does depend on the character, but the first thing that always goes through in my head is how to give the character a shape. You look at a character like Batman, if you take away all the detail and you just see the shape of that character, you know exactly who that is. So when I did say Blue Beetle, for example, I tried to come up with a costume that if you took away all the detail, if you just had him backlit, you'll still see those pincers, on his backpack and everything. You know who that is. Duke is a bat character, so he's going to have the ears, he's going to have a few of those details. So what I tried to do was, he's got a bat symbol on his chest, and I tried to make him, in a way, kind of a reverse of Batman. So whereas Batman's got a dark mask and he's got a dark cape and he's got a lighter colored suit, The Signal's got a light colored mask and a light colored accoutrements and a black suit, but the bat symbol is reversed out. So he's kind of he's got sort of a white reflective kind of a bat symbol on his chest. So I tried to do something like that. You know, but there's certain things that are the same, like his belt is very similar to Batman's, and I'm gonna have to like move over on this other side.
The belt and the chest symbols.
Yeah.
Do you always get those right, or do you sometimes catch yourself, oh wait, it's a little bit to the left, a little bit too far to the right?
Well, sure. I mean, there's always that little bit of a process that you have to do, you know?
And is that like a panic thing, you know, the night before the deadline?
Always.
When you realize, wait, I gave him the wrong symbol.
Yeah. Now, I usually have everything fairly well figured out before I start drawing, but even then, you end up with kind of like an evolution process that happens while you're drawing the book. So if you look at the way I draw Duke Thomas or the Signal in the third issue, the final issue, it actually is a little bit different than the first issue because I've been sort of figuring it out and streamlining as I go to, you know, to make the deadline, if nothing else, you know.
Well, and what's interesting about that is the approach to creating this book is much different than a lot of other books. You're working almost like the Marvel method. Sorry, DC,
Yeah.
just a reference.
Yeah.
But you're working off of very loose script details, right?
Yeah, I mean, what I'm getting is essentially just what they call a plot. So basically, it's sort of what happens, but it's not telling me angles. It's not breaking down the storytelling so much as it's sort of giving me an overview of the general events of the book, and then I figure out, you know, how many panels it's going to be. You know, sometimes I'll move things to other pages. You know, I have a lot more effect on the pacing of the book than I would with the full script kind of method. So that's always kind of fun.
As an artist, do you love having that kind of creative freedom?
I do. I mean, that was a more common method of working when I was first breaking in the 90s. It has since kind of gone away. I mean, it's a lot more rare, at least, than it used to be. But it's a way that I like to work.
How did you guys come up with that that process for this series?
Well, I mean, it was something that Dan DiDio had said that he wanted to try out more, like get people who've worked that way to like sort of do that to make the books a little bit more visual, and just as an experiment. And I think it's working. It's pretty cool. I mean, I had a lot of fun like working that way. I'd like to work that way again.
One of the things with that book that makes it stand out from the other Batman books is that we're seeing Gotham City in the daylight. There's actually sunlight that shines in Gotham.
Right, yeah, see, there's sunlight, right? There's a sun right there.
Oh, look, a bonus.
Right.
Tell me about approaching that, because so much of the Batman mythos is in the shadows, in the darkness. So
Well,
how do you approach creating a book with Batman in it where there's daylight and he's out and about in the afternoon?
There are still shadows in the daytime. I mean, if you look at the late afternoon in any city, there's always long, dark shadows. There's still plenty to do with the darkness in Gotham. It's just kind of neat to have that contrast there, and it kind of gives you a whole different color palette. Like Laura Martin is the colorist on the book, and she's had a whole different color palette to work with on this, and it's really kind of, I think, made the book look a lot different than a lot of the Bat books do. And you know, it's much more of a teenage book in tone. It's got a lot more humor. It's kind of a nice kind of like a bouncy, you know, doesn't have that
It
heaviness.
reminds me of Batman and the Outsiders a little bit.
Yeah,
With that
yeah.
vibe.
It's kind of fun.
Now, as the artist on the book, you're penciling. How much contact do you have with Laura about coloring? Like, is there a communication there about what you're looking for?
Yes, yeah, we talk a lot. Actually, Laura and I are old studio mates. You know, we've known each other a long time. We're good friends. So we actually do talk quite a bit about like the direction. Usually, when I get colors, you know, we have a pretty good shorthand. Like I'll say to her, you know, like hey, maybe go a little warmer on this, or maybe key on this detail here, or you know, recede this into the background. But I don't tell her what color choices to make, because that's her job. I mean, you know, she's better at it than I am. So it's like I would never do that. You know, she's an artist, so I let her do her thing. But you know, I do weigh in, because a lot of times we're trying to all communicate the same thing.
I just want to let the people watching on the live stream, if you like what you're seeing here, use the hashtag It's a Fan Thing and let us know what you think of Culley's process here and the drawing he's putting together, which is coming together quite nicely. I also noticed the Signal is noticeably thinner, leaner than Batman. Obviously,
sure.
that's by design.
You know, he's a teenager.
Yeah,
Batman.
not as bulky.
I like doing that sort of big, thick, you know, Batman. You know, where he's a big, crusty old dude. You know.
So what's a mistake that people make when they're drawing Batman? What's the common mistake that you think artists make when they're drawing him?
Steak?
Yeah, is it do they make the cape too long? Do they make the ears too pointy? What do you think is a common mistake that happens?
I think the cool thing about Batman is that it's a character that can bear interpretation pretty easily. I mean, you know, it's like there are certain kind of basic things that you have to do with Batman, but like, you know, you have to have the ears, you have to have like, you know, everybody draws like a different build on Batman. Like you look at Frank Miller and it's like this big, you know, huge guy, which is very different than
like the old guy, like you were mentioning.
Yeah, you know, and that's pretty different than what Capullo does, and that's different from what pretty much everybody does. I mean,
Tim Apparo's was much leaner.
Neil Adams, everybody's got a different Batman, and that's to me, that's what's cool about the character is that you can really throw a lot of interpretation in there and still have it look like Batman. You know, there's not necessarily an on-model Batman except for a few details.
But the look, the essential look, is so like iconic and recognizable. When you tackle a Batman book, how do you know how much flair you can add yourself to it, and how much you kind of have to stick to the basic template?
Me personally, it's about feel. You know, I kind of go with what feels right. I don't really try to overthink it. As far as like, I mean, I like my Batman to look tough. You know, I try to go for a certain toughness with the character, but I don't really overthink it. I just kind of draw him the way I like, you know. You'll find that as I get a little farther on this, I might get a little less conversational because I'm starting to look at detail and that sort of thing.
You looked at the clock.
Yeah. So I might go like, "What are you saying to me? Don't talk to me right now." That temperamental artist thing. Yeah.
John Romita Jr. says one of the things he loves about drawing Batman is that when he's on a deadline, he can always cheat a Batman drawing by using a lot of the cape.
Yes, Batman, and you'll
That's
see
his
me.
cheat.
You'll see me do this in about 2 minutes. I will cheat because you'll notice there's a lot more detail on Duke than there is on Batman. Batman's a pair of shoulders and a bat symbol because you can do that with Batman.
Secrets of the trade.
Yeah. Actually, I mean there's a lot to that. You know, like sort of figuring out how to cheat is like a big thing about becoming a professional in comic books. Is like where you can find your shortcuts. That's actually a big thing.
Give us a couple of Cully Hamner's cheats for making deadlines.
Well, I mean, like for example, if I have to draw a crowd scene, like if you have to draw like a bunch of people in a panel, you'll notice that in the corner there's always one person really close to the camera taking up a lot of the panel. There's always one guy in the foreground, and then there are a couple in the midground, and then there are a bunch of really indistinct little figures in the background. And if you look at issue 3, there's a lot of crowd stuff in there, and you'll see that in practice. Because I had to get it done, you know?
Is Gotham architecture a pain for you to draw?
You know, it really...
Because for most artists, architecture is the Achilles heel.
I mean, you know, in the sense that, you know, it's buildings with a lot of detail. But again, it's like, if you look at any sort of city, sort of like environment, if you look at like the buildings in the foreground, they're going to have more detail to your sight, to your vision. But things get less distinct as they move into the background, into the distance. So I usually kind of make use of that. So the buildings in the back, in the far distance, tend not to have windows, you know, and they tend to be shapes, that sort of thing. But as far as Gotham is concerned, you know, we sort of had to do a different look at Gotham in this, and a lot of it is centered around this thing called the Gotham Solar Project. So I had to design that, and really that kind of took up all of the distinctiveness of the design of the city. So the rest of the city, basically New York, you know, basically like your kind of average large urban center in America. So I didn't really kind of do like the Anton First kind of like super personality Gotham, because most of the personality was taken up with the kind of main central kind of building in the series.
For the art geeks at home, they're going to want to know what pencils and markers you use, if you use any specific ones.
Well,
Let
for
us
something
know.
like this, you know, I wanted to use something that was big and fat because I could do it a little faster for the crowd here and they'd be able to see what I was doing. Normally, I tend to use Copics, like smaller Copic markers for con sketches. But something like this, you know, I wanted people to be able to see it. I get those abs in there, you know, a bit of a belly button.
Nice six-pack you gave him there.
Yeah.
Duke is ripped.
Okay, gonna do a little bit of filling in some blacks on this.
You're rocking and rolling now. Perfect time to tell you, you have about 5 minutes left.
Yeah.
No pressure.
One thing I like
Dan
about
DiDio's knocking on the door.
What?
Wondering where it is.
One thing I like about drawing Batman, even just his face, is I always try to make it seem like his face is in heavy shadow, even if the lighting environment that he's in is not necessarily a dark environment, because I always sort of feel like Batman eats light. So like, you know, he's always going to have kind of like these sort of heavy, you know, like when I draw Batman's face, I don't necessarily, like I'll just do like these big fat shapes like that, you know. Got a shadow there. And you know, you end up with Batman, the lower part of Batman's face pretty quickly. You don't have to do a lot of drawing to like sort of to get him.
Who was your Batman artist when you were a kid and you were just a fan?
Oh man, that's so tough.
Who was your guy?
Because there's so many good ones. Norm Brayfogle was one that I used to really like a lot. Used to do detective comics. Miller obviously was a huge one. I loved what Miller did. Mazzucchelli. Oh, Mazzucchelli. David Mazzucchelli for Batman Year One. I love some of the Lee Weeks stuff that I'm seeing right now. I think he's brilliant.
It is true. So many. If you ask 20 different artists that question, you'll probably get 20 different answers.
Well,
There's been that many artists who have had great runs on Batman.
You know, it's like you still get into that situation where all these guys draw Batman differently. Everybody's got a different look for that character, you know?
Are those those artists that you mentioned? Are those the ones that you think had a big impact on you when you were getting into the business
Sure.
and trying to figure out your style?
Yeah, I mean, even now, it's like, you know, I look at some of these artists doing Batman, and I'm like, God, why can't I do that? You know? Like I said, Lee Weeks is one right now that's sort of like killing me with the stuff that I'm seeing. Like he'll post on Twitter every now and then, like whatever it is he's doing. Like whatever page he's on or whatever, and it's just beautiful stuff. And I'm like, you know, then I look at what I'm doing and I'm like, why can't I do what Lee does, you know? I think I'm starting to run out of ink here.
Well, I'm not sure if there's an art supply store inside the convention center, so that might be a problem. So the third issue of Batman and the Signal's coming out.
Yeah, that should be out on the 25th, I believe.
What else do you have lined up?
That's a good question.
On your
I don't-
palette.
I can't really
what's
say.
next for you?
Haven't I done enough? No. I'm not sure exactly. We're talking about stuff, but nothing has solidified yet, so we'll see.
I think I know the answer to this question, but if they walked into the DC offices and they asked you to pitch them, what do you really want to do? Give me your dream project. Go. What would it be?
No, I mean I've done a lot of the DC characters. I've worked on everything at one point or another. I love doing the question. The stuff I did with Greg Rucka was like that was like one of the high points of my career, just creatively. I don't know. To me, it depends on not just the character, but who I'm working with, and what the story is, and all that stuff. I apologize. I'm running out of ink here, so I'm getting kind of grayed out here. But you kind of get the idea.
I absolutely thought you were going to say Shazam.
Oh God, yeah. You put me on the spot.
Because I know that's your guy.
How did you know that?
Come on, I do a little bit of research.
Yeah,
Not
no,
much, just a little bit.
That's okay. That is one character that I would probably sight unseen if they said, "Hey, you want to do Shazam?" I'd say yes, absolutely.
Well, DC Entertainment does have that movie coming out soon.
I know.
So they're probably going to want to do it.
I have asked around about that character, and I've always got we'll talk later, and we don't really go there. But yeah, I totally blanked on that. Thank you for pointing that out.
Well, the big red cheese is due for a big comeback.
Yeah, I agree. Well, that's pretty much it. I mean, like my marker's dying here, so I don't know what else I can do with this thing. It's dying.
30 seconds. I guess what's left now is the signature.
Yeah. All right. Ooh. Thank you.
Excellent. Give it up for Cully Hamner.
Thanks.
Hey guys, don't forget, follow all the action here from C2E2 using the hashtag It's a Fan Thing, and keep watching this live stream right here. And coming up next year on the live stage, Charles Soule talking about The Hunt for Wolverine. Stay right there.